So is Alberto back? Or Joyce?
Not yet.
Is Joyce here?
Yes, Joyce. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention the worker involvement criteria, that the scheduling is part of the worker involvement criteria and that everyone is required to schedule based on a commitment. So it's just good to note in terms of what we just went over and make sure everyone has access.
And it's part of the criteria we verified. Yeah.
Well, it's part of what we just talked about, but yeah.
All right. So let me link. Is Joyce here?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
Yeah. Why don't you link the?
Was that the
Can
criteria?
link it as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we work on it together, right? So here, do you want me to copy and paste everything in the notes, Jay?
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that. So first, maybe we can start with the list, right? So this is the list, and we first separate. Since you remember, Jay, you told us worker criteria is flexible. We want to start by requesting what we are actually active, and then we're gonna bring in all the criteria. Otherwise, we would all go on individual from Facebook.
Up from Facebook.
Yeah. Another way of putting it is that it's much more important to do the highest priority criteria well than to do a bunch of criteria poorly. Right? Just like all of our work, we want to focus on one thing at a time. We want to make sure that our top priority criteria for our worker involvement is followed correctly before going into things that are not high priority.
Okay, perfect. So there is the list, and the green ones are the ones that we requested for this for this for this verification. The orange one are the one they're gonna.
By the way, Moth is here.
Oh, Moth can check in.
Moth? Hello.
Hi.
Hi, can you please check in, Moth?
I'm just checking in. Yes, I'm just checking in, please.
Right, so you're late as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Are we checking
Yes.
orally?
No.
Moth. Okay, what's your number, Moth? Hello. Moth?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
please give your number from 1 to 9.
I'm 2.5.
Okay. What have you been working on?
No, we have been. At the moment, we were working on the taxes, the 1099s. Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Okay. We can continue, Alberto.
Alberto?
Right.
So he was talking about
I'm here.
in the orange and the red.
Yes, the red ones are the one that they're like in standby for the moment, on hold.
And the orange?
The orange are the one that we're gonna bring. We're gonna include for the next one.
All right. So, but what about this order? Where do you get the order?
This order we got it from the worker coordination responsibility organizing. Obviously, we updated it with what's applicable now. So the responsibility organizing is this one. I mean, we are also updating the new one. So I'm gonna link the two ones. linking the responsibilities organized, line 33.
So what's going on? What's next?
All right, so here down, I copied and pasted the verification that we did.
Yeah. So the main, what is the primary goal of the responsibility? What is the outcome that we're trying to do, and how do you prevent upfront pay stop? Because we're on upfront pay stop, right? Or we're trying to prevent upfront pay stop today. So the question is, what
Yeah,
is the goal of the work, and then how to prevent upfront pay stop?
So the main goal is to verify that the workers are meeting their basic involvement. So the minimum criteria for them to be professional worker to work, right? Minimum criteria to be able to work, and to prevent upfront pay stop is the goal is to communicate to the workers.
One time, because that was a little confusing there. So you're saying the main goal is to, I thought someone was typing, but I guess no one's typing, so I'll write it again. What? The main goal is
to verify that the workers meet their minimum involvement criteria for working in FQN.
Okay. All right. So for me, that's a very confusing goal and doesn't make a lot of sense because of a couple things. One, if the workers don't meet the criteria, it doesn't address what's next, right? So it says to verify that workers are meeting the minimum criteria, but doesn't actually address the process of doing that. So I feel like the goal needs to be in the perspective of the workers, right? We're doing this for two reasons. One is for the workers to be professional and engaged and active and enjoying themselves. And if they don't meet these criteria, it's going to be very difficult to do any meaningful work. And then two, obviously, it's for the organization, so the organization can have deliverables, right? Because
5 minutes to the topic.
Joyce?
5 minutes to our topic.
Perfect. So I think that the goal needs to be in the perspective of the worker, because otherwise it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like it's either in the perspective of the worker or the organization.
Okay. So these are the goals that are in the responsibility organizing.
Okay. So verify each worker's status. So this makes a lot of sense. This first one is very, very clear. And what this is very clear about is that it's about the worker. You're verifying each worker's status. What is their current status in relationship to their criteria and their involvement? For me, that's more important than the verification of the worker. Do you see the difference?
Yeah. To verify each worker's
being, right? And their goal, because it's a journey, right? You don't just you're not magically meeting all the criteria or magically not meeting all the criteria. It's much more dynamic and complicated than that. And it's an ongoing status updating, and it's constantly changing. So you're working with the worker to achieve the goals. You're not going to work against the worker. All right, and do you want to go through the rest of them, or I don't know. I just think that's really for me kind of encapsulated. Like that, the first one is like perfect.
Okay. To get all responses from worker and remove those who are not responding to our communications. This is not very, very clear.
So basically, to get responses from every worker, and then to add workers to the budget removal process for those who are not responding to our communications. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're not communicating, boom, automatic.
You're part of the removals.
Automatic proposal to be removed from the budget.
Yeah. Then this is a more detailed, but it's similar to the first one. To verify each worker's engagement and involvement, including their commitment, availability, schedule, responsibilities, status, MBT, budget, etc.
This next one is like not clear at all, right? So for me, this is a secondary goal, which is the verification of the actual work itself. It's not the verification of the worker, right? So the next one looks like it needs to be deleted because I don't even know if this makes any sense. Like I don't even understand this.
Yeah, we also had some difficult understanding this.
So make that one red. Okay, so you can continue if you want.
Yeah, then to make sure that all initial work involvement steps and process for onboarding for new recruits are verified and meet criteria in order to work. This is more specific on the onboarding, right?
Yes, for new workers.
This is
Typically, the worker involvement criteria affects new workers more than existing workers.
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
Then, to ensure that before moving to the next step, a new worker must be verified first and that all information is correctly updated. It is not very clear what the next step is, but I guess it's the next step is putting the worker in hard stop.
Well, no, that's the whole point here is that this is focusing again on the worker, not the work of the verification. Okay, so the most important thing here is that you got to put the worker first. So this is saying that before moving to, for example, the next step of putting on hard stop or whatever, the worker needs to be verified and that all of information needs to be correctly updated. In essence, that you want to be understanding their situation and working with them to get them the information that they need so that, you know.
Yeah, so this we can improve.
Perspective so that I think this is very important. So to ensure that before you put a worker on upfront pay stop, individual upfront pay stop, that the worker is communicated with as a human being so that they understand everything and are able to correct it, right? So that's basically the bottom line here, is that the focus of this responsibility needs to be on supporting the worker, right? This is part of, I would put this under personnel support, not HR. The difference between HR and personnel support is personnel support is all about supporting the workers bottom up, whereas HR is basically top down, just like making sure that your HR and that your assets as workers is meeting the needs of the organization, right? They're two very different ways of looking at.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this process is supposed to be supporting the workers. This is part of personnel support in my perspective, right? It's not just like HR. So and then of course you want to put workers that don't meet criteria onto hard stop and upfront pay stop. We know hard stop doesn't really mean anything these days. So maybe there needs to be, you know, a half pay stop added to that as well. Okay. So I think this looks good as far as the goals. I think that they're clear, and it's clear that this is not about just verifying that the workers meet minimum criteria. That's not the goal, right? The goal is much more dynamic and about supporting and understanding the needs of each worker and where they are in a process, right? This is a process. We're not expecting workers to just magically have everything verified and perfect, right? It's like a process. So how do you make sure that eventually they have everything verified and perfect? What is the primary goal of the process in relationship to how to prevent upfront pay stop?
To prevent upfront pay stop is to communicate to the worker. I mean, to ensure that goal, to ensure that before you put a worker on, you do an upfront pay stop, you're communicating with him and making sure that he's aware and he's updated about his status in relation to this criteria.
Perfect. Yes. So this makes a lot of sense. And has that happened?
It happened, but it didn't happen really well. You made a comment there that wasn't clear.
And it's the same comment I'm making right now, that instead of focusing on the verification of the workers, you're focusing on the humanity of the worker and that each worker is a human being. And so how do you communicate with the worker as a human being?
You communicate in a lot more detail. You communicate with a single message toward the worker,
Yeah.
unlike an overall status.
Per
Asking
worker
questions.
communication.
Yeah.
You might ask questions, like if you're not sure about a certain point of verification, you're like, okay, this is missing. Do you have this, right? So you could present the information as a question instead of as a ultimatum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could present as a question instead of an ultimatum. So in that context, it actually could easily happen in multiple different messages as opposed to one. Now, one message, like if someone's just completely not meeting all their goals, it's not, or all their criteria, it's not going to help by giving a laundry list of like 20 things they need to do. You need to do all this stuff by next week, or you're going to go on upfront pay stop, right? That's not particularly helpful. What is more helpful is understanding what policies they're breaking, and if they don't meet basic policies in relationship to the budget removals, right? That's all they need to know. They just need to know you are going to be proposed to be removed from the budget for this reason. You need to fix that. That's really the primary goal. If they meet that criteria and then there's all these other things, then it's a matter of trying to get them on top of it by presenting the most important ones and getting them into the process of improving their status.
Correct. Yeah, correct. I'm gonna update the responsibility organizer.
So what is our policy on putting someone on individual upfront pay stop?
So the policy is that you put them first on 24 hours hard stop, and they still don't meet.
Well, we know that hard stop is not really applicable. It doesn't really work. But what is the policy for the upfront pay stop? How long does someone get to fix these problems before they go on individual upfront pay stop?
24 hours.
No.
Before the eval.
No. The evaluation session is the deadline for the work to get done.
Yeah.
For you, whoever's assigned to do the worker evaluation criteria. This is not the deadline for the individual workers to meet the criteria. That's a totally separate process. Does everyone understand that? It's very important. Right? The deadline in the upfront pay stop we're dealing with right now is to make sure the work gets done. It has nothing to do with the individuals meeting the criteria. That's a separate deadline. So what is the policy on putting an individual on upfront criteria, worker involvement, individual upfront pay stop, or really any individual upfront pay stop? What is the criteria for that? Because 24 hours is obviously not.
1 week, maybe.
1 week.
Taya,
were you going to say something?
yeah, I was looking at 48 hours.
What did you say? 48 hours? Yeah, it's 1 week.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 1 week. So if you have a bunch of things that you're supposed to do and work that needs to get done, you're supposed to get a week's notice. So you do them. Some workers literally only work 3 hours a week, right? So if you give them 24 hours, if they don't even have time, they might have a full-time job. You give them 24 hours, that's ridiculous, right?
Yes.
Because there's no way that they would be able to meet that depending on the 24 hours of the week that they get to work on it. Right? So
We already spent 15 minutes for this topic.
So I really the last question is really like, what can you do to put a worker on upfront pay stop if you have not given them notice for 1 week?
You talk policy.
No, you can't.
You can't. Yeah. Yeah, you can't really do it. But we do have a couple other policies. If they're breaking policies that do have 24-hour warnings and that happen quicker, if they're actively breaking policies, we can definitely put someone on probation and stop them from working much quicker than a week. But for worker involvement,
the only policy that puts you faster on individual from pay stop is policy tracking. Like for example, correct. I see that Ate, Moth, Joyce, you have not do policy tracking 15 minutes for being late, as we informed you to do. right? So at the end of the session, I would send an announcement, say you have 24 hours to do policy tracking for that. If you still don't do the policy tracking in 24 hours, I would say now you have 24 hours to do policy tracking, the original policy tracking, and also you need to do policy tracking for not having done policy tracking. If you don't do that, you're automatically going into individual upfront pay stop.
Correct. So, and then we can call that communications, right? So if someone's not communicating, it's possible. It's not really like a full upfront pay stop. It's more of what we call a probation, where basically they're not allowed to work, right? So we can tell someone they're no longer allowed to work, right? As a management, it's not really a full individual upfront pay stop. We're basically just telling them they can't work anymore, right? So therefore, if you can't work, you can't really get upfront pay. But there's still a little wiggle room. Like if someone kept working, legally we might still have to pay them, right? But they would get removed from the budget if they didn't follow the policies, because they would be continuing to break policies if they're going against their probation, right? So that would just cause more problems. So anyways, the point is that communication can get someone cut off quicker. There's communication problems. But as far as just if everyone's communicating perfectly normally, they're doing their best to follow the policies, the worker involvement criteria cannot ever get someone on individual upfront pay stop faster than 1 week. And that's the fastest. In reality, it should be like a week of hard stop, a week of half pay stop, and then a week of upfront pay stop. So really, it should be more like a month. Does that make sense? You get a warning, then you go on hard stop, then you go on half pay stop, then you're going on upfront pay stop. So it really should take more like a month as opposed to a week. But if someone is obviously going against it and they're not making any progress, it can speed up much quicker. Like if you're like, hey, they have 5 things they need to complete. If they do 1 every week, eventually it'll be fine. Like even if they don't meet the 1 month deadline, it's perfectly fine. They're making progress. They're doing what's being asked of them, and they're eventually going to meet all of the deadlines, right? Or the guidelines and the policies. But if they're not even trying, then you can put them on upfront pay stop much faster, right? That makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I think I'm good on this.
Me too.
More questions.
1 month. 1 month before. I'm writing this guideline that I'm going to put in the responsibility organizing. So 1 week, but
I could say one more thing while you're saying that, which is that the bottom line for preventing the upfront pay stop is a clear message to the individual worker. So that would be like, okay, Jay, here's Jay. This is your list of minimums to complete in the next week to prevent going towards hard stop, half pay stop, upfront pay stop. And then you would list like, your POP, your main buddy team, your criteria for scheduling. Okay, so that's what I would want to see, and I want to see it organized per individual, so that it's very, very, very clear to the individual. Whereas up here, you look at this massive spreadsheet, it can be very overwhelming. All the colors, all the columns. It's like, where do I fit in? How does it all work? This is not clear communication. This does not count. It needs to be, okay, Jay, you need to meet these criteria and be moving forward to improve it by, in the next week or so that you're not getting in a worse position with your criteria involving criteria. Okay, does that make sense?
Perfectly sense. Yeah, we made a communication with each worker, but I understand.
When did you make a communication with each worker?
Yesterday.
The message that you also answered to, Jay.
Where?
Right?
Pardon?
You said it's not clear on eval team.
Well, no, you made a communication to all workers to look at the spreadsheet. That's you said, like, all workers have a lot of problems. And you listed all these problems, and then you linked the spreadsheet. It was so much information. There were literally dozens of problems. There's hundreds and hundreds of cells with all of the different things. Like, as a worker, there's no way that anyone can really understand what's going on. I mean, imagine if we hired someone last week and they got that message, they would have no idea.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it was too
Right?
much.
So it needs to be a personalized message, and you need to go through that right now. Otherwise, we all go on upfront pay stop.
Okay. So let's do that.
And you can also prioritize. You know, if you just want to prioritize and just say like, okay, Jay, you're
We
fine.
need to take a 5-minute
So
break.
then you can just skip that. Oh, yeah, let's take a 5-minute break. But before I take a break, you guys could get started with this even, you know, at the end of the break or whatever. But the bottom line is that you could just prioritize the workers. Like if there's 7 workers, you're like, okay, these 3 workers are good enough. We're gonna skip them. So you're gonna get a pass for this week or this 2 weeks or whatever, however often this happens. And then these 4 workers, okay, you're much worse off. Let's do specific announcements to these 4 workers, get them on the right track, and then we can worry about the other 3 workers later. The point is that you need to like get focused and started. It needs to be 1 worker at a time. It's the same policy as everything else, 1 thing at a time, right? Because workers are human beings. They need to be treated as human beings. And if you want to actually achieve these goals, you need to communicate them as human beings. Okay.
Right.
So just prioritize the ones that you want to focus on. You don't need to do all of them. And you certainly don't need to send someone a message, oh, you meet all the criteria. That's just a waste of time. If they meet the criteria, then you just move on to the next person.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm gonna send the message. I'm gonna prioritize obviously Ate and Moth that are here.
Great. That sounds great. So you can prioritize the people who are here, but it doesn't change the fact that to prevent the upfront pay stop, I don't know when the upfront pay stop is. I guess maybe we have till the end of the day. Like, what is the actual deadline? Is it
the start of the session?
The start of this session. Yeah. So I mean, if this has to happen now, then you have to do everybody, and you have to do it now so that we can check it off.
Yeah.
And
one question: do I need to also do the decision makers?
If we're prioritizing them, absolutely. It depends on the priorities. So it depends on what we believe the priorities to be. If we don't want to prioritize the decision makers, then we can skip them, but then we can prioritize them next time, right? But the point is that it needs to be clear what you're doing. If you're not prioritizing because you feel that someone has met the criteria good enough, that's fine. But then it should be clear in the process.
Well, I mean, I would. I mean, for example, the 2 that they only have peep and picture. I don't know. I mean, we are slowing down with the website. I think this is okay for the moment. But for example, the one that we already proposed also for the removal, that there's no check-ins, no communications, nothing, and also Cinedum, that's not with the training. Maybe just Nadine and not Nadine, Angela and Cinedum.
Okay, but I mean, I would say that however you're dealing with the decision makers, you should deal with them as a process, right? Because all the decision makers are related to our training process, the decision makers, and we have not done a very good job with that. So it goes both ways.
All right, let's start with the worker, and then we can see about the decision maker after the break.
Let's take a 5-minute break, and then when we get back, we can just go through it. But I mean, for me, it's pretty clear the work has not been done, and that we either need to decide to go an upfront pay stop, or we need to get the work done. There's really no other option, which I think might affect the rest of our topics.
I think we can send out these communications fairly quickly, so I can get started. So,
yeah. 5-minute break?
Yeah.